on this episode of whodem, which is obviously good if you're a homeowner, but me and my generation, we're looking at it as like, we might not ever have one of these homes that people keep talking about. We might be forced to rent.
President Obama, when he came out to campaign for us, when I ran for the first time, told this story about how he got kicked out of Disneyland for smoking.
Have you been hearing about all the Epstein stuff with the Trump administration? Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the whodem podcast. My name is Damian Galvan, and the episode you're about to watch is a conversation that me and Representative Cisneros had after the most recent episode we released with Aaron Parnas. We get into some very interesting stuff, and I think it's something that everyone will enjoy. We talk about Jeffrey Epstein and what he knows about the matter. We talk about making Democrats cool again, and if it's even a possibility. Gives us a little bit of insight into why he thinks President Obama and Bill Clinton are particularly captivating figures. That being said, enjoy the rest of the episode. All right. Well, that was we have a few extra minutes here, Representative, if you just want to chat. I know Aaron, he's driving actually up to New Jersey. Let me know before that he was going to have to go a little bit early.
Okay.
Yeah, well, what were your thoughts?
I appreciate him being flexible. I know we originally had this scheduled for what was it, Monday?
We had this. I think we rescheduled this like 3 times. We had it scheduled like, I think back in July, end of June, and then we had some time early in July, and then we finally got it down.
The being called back to Washington D.C. for the House of Representatives kind of really. I think that's when we were supposed to do it, and we had to cancel because I had to fly back instead.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate his flexibility in being able to do that. But now just to kind of touch on his thing right there too, right? Like I agree with him in that, I think New York is the thing. And as, I kind of mentioned to you kind of offline, right? I actually think the bigger races that we're going to see later in the year are the governor races in New Jersey and New Jersey and Virginia that are going to be more crucial as to like, okay, what's the way forward and how do we kind of win with the messaging that's going to be out there? Because in a sense, they're talking about a lot of the same things, right? But the approach and who's presenting it are different, right? I was elected in 2018 with Abigail Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill. Abigail served in the CIA. Mikey went to the Naval Academy, was a helo pilot, a helicopter pilot. So they have that national security background. They're more moderates. Abigail and Mikey are both somebody who kind of reached across the aisle, worked with Republicans in order to get things done. And it was really about solving problems, right, and working with the other side in order to do that. And I think in both of their campaigns, they kind of presented a message kind of similar to the individual in New York that, one of fairness, right? One of bringing down cost.
Yeah.
How do we kind of make things more affordable? And while the messages are kind of the same, it's who's presenting it and doing it, right, is kind of the thing that I think is going to really get kind of the difference in that we'll see, right? Where, I think it is important, right? And I think, Aaron was right. A democratic socialist isn't necessarily going to work. It could be you could have a moderate Democrat and a democratic socialist saying the same thing, but if you put them in Kansas, Wisconsin, Indiana, excuse me, Southern California, it's going to be taken 2 different ways.
Yeah. I do think that the framing is something that was also very interesting to me because I agree with you 100%. Some of the policy issues I think that are going to be more difficult for him to actually achieve. The label of democratic socialist is something that obviously he had to overcome in the election. You saw, Cuomo consistently use that as a pejorative. And it's been interesting to me, just going back to what you were saying with affordability. The number one thing was obviously there was policies behind what he was saying, but always it just came back to affordability. Right. Whenever the conversation would go somewhere, it was always just, okay, ultimately what I'm trying to do here is make New York more affordable. This is how I'm going to do it, but focus on the affordability component of it. Do you think that that's the strategy moving forward for Democrats, where it's we want to make your life easier to live?
Well, I think that, that's the thing that Donald Trump promised, right? You know, he was going to bring down the price of eggs, that he was going to make things, groceries more affordable. And he promised it on day one, and it really hasn't happened. But, you know, I think that's what people want, right? It's the ability for their dollar to go, you know, to stretch and to go longer. Um, you know, I mean, we have a housing crisis here in Southern California, or, you know, actually the whole, not just Southern California, the whole state, where, you
The
know,
whole nation, for that matter.
yeah, where, you know, continues to rise. And I don't really think people grasp the concept, and this is why SALT has kind of been a big kind of factor for us, or thing that we've kind of thought was unfair when they kind of took it away, right? Which is
Oh,
state
sorry,
and
can you
local.
explain?
SALT's a state and local tax deduction, right? That you were able to take on your income, your federal income tax, that, you know, the Republicans took away. You know, there's this misconception, right, that somebody lives in $1 million house, that it's like, oh, it's a mansion. Um, you know, it's a mansion. You got this huge driveway. You're probably on acres of land. Here in, like, you know, in California, there's parts of California where $1 million house is like a 2 bedroom, 1 bath house.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
uh, and that's kind of the thing. It's like, and even I look at things sometimes. I'm like, how could anybody pay for that much for a home, and they don't even have a yard?
no, yeah,
You
it's
know,
ridiculous.
but you know, that's the thing that we kind of need to bring down, right? And it really is going to have to become a supply and demand issue. Well, it is everything's a supply and demand issue, right?
Yeah,
You know, you don't have a huge supply, prices are going to go up. Um, and so, and there's many things, and you could say this kind of takes us back to the immigration issue as well, right? Because the people that are building the homes, a big, large part of that workforce are undocumented individuals who are coming here because they're willing to take those jobs to work out in the heat to build those homes, and do it, and do that, right? And that's kind of why it is important, and that's why. Okay, what was the other article I was reading too? Right, again, it was the same article about this individual who married this undocumented woman, who's kind of talking. Uh, you know, he didn't really see the impact that the immigrant community had in his community. That they've actually kind of turned it around, that they have kind of that there is kind of thriving now. There are businesses and there is an economic impact. And even Michael Bloomberg talked about this. I remember I was at an event where he was speaking. And God, this was like years ago, maybe, you know, back when he was still mayor of New York. Um, Say, like, you know, if you really kind of want to turn around a community that's kind of suffering, move in the immigrants, move in an immigrant, you know,
mm,
immigrants in this community, and they will find a way to become entrepreneurial. They will find a way to turn it around, and they will kind of make it work. And these communities will start to thrive again.
yeah,
Um, but and it's true, and it's true,
yeah,
right? And we've got to get people to kind of look and see that impact that they have, and why it is important to bring them into the community, and what they can do in the economic impact, because they will come and they will spend, right? They'll provide jobs, they'll create jobs, uh, and they'll spend, right? You know, put dollars into the economy, which is
yeah,
good.
yeah. Yeah, no, it's a net positive. I think the more that, you know, the more that people spend, obviously the healthier that our economy is going to be. I'm curious because I don't know if it's the situation in California, but in Atlanta, it's not so much of a supply issue, it's more of a control issue.
Mm.
Where in Atlanta, it's 60% of all housing, 60 to 80% of all housing is owned by two companies.
Mm.
And I feel like that in particular is an issue when we're talking about economic advancement. Because when you're talking about, you know, actually being able to build generational wealth, one of those first steps, and you heard Kamala Harris talk about this on the campaign a lot, is home ownership,
Yeah.
owning your home. And so I'm curious, what's the situation in California? Is it that there's a lack of housing and overpopulation thing, or is it more of a distribution issue?
You know, it has become, and actually, they just kind of the state legislature just actually lessened some of the laws, right? But it has been, for environmental reasons, it had been kind of tough in order to be able to kind of build for a long time, right? There were like a lot of restrictions and things that you had to do. Now they just kind of lessened some of those, um, but so hopefully, I guess the result will be like more building. Um, which will create a bigger supply of homes. Uh, No, but when you say like in Atlanta, are they these two companies? Are they controlling as far as like housing, as far as like rent housing, or like they're just the home builders?
The housing market as a
Yeah.
whole.
Okay.
So, and I've seen this happen in other communities, and I mean, it even happened, to my home growing up, where we bought it, but boy, it must have been 10, 12 years ago, for probably around $200,000, and today that same house is tripled in value, which
Yeah.
is obviously good if you're a homeowner. But
Right.
me and my generation, we're looking at
Yeah.
it as like, we might not ever have one of these homes that people keep talking about. We might be
Well,
forced to rent.
that's the paradox, right? It's like when you talk about housing, is that people want to buy cheap and they want to be able to, when they sell it, when that time comes, they want it to be worth a lot more than what they paid for it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, how do you have it both ways? It's kind of hard. Um, but I think housing is definitely that issue, right? That is the American dream, and one of the people want to go back and refer to, like, oh, like post World War II in the '50s and everything, right? It was you could buy a home was affordable, and I remember my grandmother telling a story about like when they bought their house, right? That my grandma lived, and she lived there for like over 60 years. It's the house that you know I remember growing up in. My mom, that's where she was raised and everything, and we would always go. It was like the focus of our family life. That's wherever we went and everything happened. It always happened at grandma's house. But she told a story about how she went and she bought the house, um, and how she was able just to kind of save money, right? From like, oh, I save a little money here, a little money there, and was able to kind of put down the down payment, right? But this is at a time when housing was being built because, you know, post World War II, there was an influx of housing that came and that was created, and communities were built, suburbs were built around major cities to kind of go. And so the cost of housing was affordable at that time.
Yeah.
Plus, they had the GI Bill, which allowed individuals to kind of use their GI Bill in order to go and to get that VA loan. Um, the VA loan was part of the GI Bill that came into law that allowed them to get that loan and to buy the house, to give them the loan so they could buy the house. And it is, and there's just not, we just don't have that massive building, that influx of housing that's being built right now like we did during this time, while our population has continued to grow.
So do you think building more houses will naturally cause, obviously, if you're talking about like simple supply and demand economics, the assumption would be yes. But obviously, when you get into the real world situation, it changes a little bit depending on nuances and whatnot. Do you think that
Yeah.
naturally it would happen, or do you think that the building has to be done in a specific way?
Well, I mean, it has to be done right. We want to, obviously, you want it to be safe. You want it to be, meet standards, especially here in Southern California, right? Things have to be built to code to kind of withstand earthquakes and things like that. You don't want to build in constantly building in flood zones and things like that. So there are some kind of things that you need to kind of do and kind of take into account when you're building. But there are advocates out here that are like building more. Why aren't we building more around railroad stations and kind of railroads around the tracks and things like that to kind of go? For some reason, that's kind of been, there's always kind of been a pushback about kind of like that doing that. But if we kind of did that, that would create more housing. Now, when you got like, you know, you have a neighborhood and maybe there's like 3 or 4 houses for sale and you got 30 people looking. I mean, obviously the advantage is to the seller, right? If you have more homes that are being built and kind of influx there, right there, obviously it's going to give more people options to what they can do and kind of make things more affordable. The thing I never really kind of, which I used to think was crazy when I used to live up in the Bay Area in California, was that people would put a price on a house, and the expectation always was that people were going to come in over the asking price. It's
Yeah.
like and we're disappointed when if somebody came in like at asking price.
Yeah.
But that was just kind of the expectation of the housing market at that time. And so, but I think we have to find ways to make housing more affordable. We got to make loans more accessible. Like I always talk about how the VA loan was how I bought my first home.
I was about to
Right?
ask you about your first home.
Yeah. That's what I used to do that, right? And even then, right, for the longest time, it was still sitting at a low rate. And actually, that kind of adjusted, I think, within the last 10 years, they've kind of made that um, how they kind of configure that and kind of figure out what the price should be at the home um, is different. But even that is not really kind of fair because you take a county like San Bernardino, where it takes the cost of housing within the county as to how much the VA loan could be. Uh, I think San Bernardino County here in California is like the largest county in the country,
Mm,
and it has very affluent areas, and it has very areas that are very underserved and low income.
yeah.
And somehow, when the calculation gets all played into that role, so that or into that, the whole county gets played into the calculations to kind of figuring out what kind of how much your VA loan could be for San Bernardino County.
I see.
If you're living in one of those more you want to buy a home in one of those affluent areas, it's not meeting your goals or what you actually need for that area.
So, a question here: why don't they tie it to? And I've seen this with a lot of policies, and I understand the complexity, maybe like 100 years ago, of like getting into the nuanced details of every single person's records. And maybe this is just idealistic, but it is a question that I do have. Why not just tie it to the individual? Like, why not just say, you know what, you have this is your income, this is what you qualify for the VA loan on?
Well, I think the thought is right. If you can do that, then you can just go out and get a regular home loan, right? If you can't do that, but I think it is in a way to kind of go into great fairness is why it was. And people want to do a VA loan because there are certain things that there are certain advantages to do that, right? But at the, at the same time, I think it is kind of tight, and you still have to be able to afford the house, right? So you can't,
Sure. Yeah.
just get a
Problem
five
number
million.
one. Yeah.
You can't get a VA loan for like $500,000 if you can't afford that house. So that's kind of taken into account too, right? So in a way it is, but there is a cap on how much you can actually get for a VA loan.
Yeah, I was interested in something that you said earlier too, because this is something that's become really popular with my generation, which is the walkable cities. I don't know if you've heard about these,
Mhm.
where it's like a 15-minute walkable city where you have your work, you have where you eat, you have where you go to school. I'm in Arlington, Virginia. That's where I live right now,
Yeah.
and it's known as one of the most like walkable cities in the United States. The public transportation is exceptional. Is that something that you're in favor of? Is there a nuance that people aren't understanding, or just what are your thoughts on the walkable city approach?
No, I think it's great, and that's one of the things that I loved about the East Coast. It's what I loved about Washington D.C. and when I went to school there, right? It's what I it was one of the great things of about San Francisco. Then I won't say that too loud, but but I actually had a friend who moved to San Francisco because she never learned how to drive. And it became easier for her to kind of go and to navigate that, right? Because they had the public transportation. She could take a bus, she could take the BART, she could take the Muni to get to where she needed to go. She could do everything she needed to do around the neighborhood that she lived, but get to work using public transportation. Alexandria, like you go to Old Town Alexandria is like that, right? Washington D.C. is like that with the metro and kind of being able to do. You can live in your community, but then get around to other parts of the city, by getting on the metro or taking the bus to get you around. And that is one of the things I will say that is missing in Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, when you talk about Los Angeles, it's not just the city of Los Angeles, but the whole surrounding area is
Yeah,
built up of suburbs around it. And even the counties, you have Orange County, Ventura County, Riverside County, um, that are all kind of built up around it and connected, and they all kind of, in many ways, share the same media market. And so, I mean, like driving, like I went to L.A. yesterday. It took us an hour and a half to get to where we needed to go. Um, it's just different aspects of that, right? Now you can go when you're driving, right? But having California used to have a trolley system, right? They used to have the red trolleys here that
Yeah.
kind of went around in there, and you could go and you could navigate and move around. But when they built the freeways here in Southern California, they kind of got rid of that, which was a big mistake because it should have been something that was kind of built upon that would have allowed you to kind of go, and it really would have taken a lot of the congestion that we have today would have been gone. Now they're trying to kind of counter that with the MetroLink, which is a train that connects the counties. Like you can take the MetroLink in from Orange County into downtown LA, San Bernardino County, and the other counties to kind of get in there, to get you into LA where a lot of people work. Um, and now they're building out the metro. The metro, which started originally in Los Angeles, and the city of Los Angeles is kind of building out. And it's actually being built out into parts. They just are in the process of they completed them, and now they're doing the testing for 4 new stops that are going to be in my district, with the metro. But I think having those things, and even actually you're seeing that in some of the downtown areas, like in my district, right? They are kind of going to that concept of kind of having that downtown area with housing around the area where you can kind of go out and work. You can shopping's local. You can go out and you can go to the restaurants that are local. You're seeing that in the city of Covina. You're seeing in places like Laverne, San Dimas, Monrovia. All these little places, right, are kind of developed their own kind of little downtown area.
Yeah.
Where people can live now, people can work. It's become like a meeting point for people. Where people go to lunch, they go to dinner. Offices are opening up around there. And so it is, it is a concept that I think is great. Now, look, I love the suburbs. I grew up in the suburbs. I think they're great places to kind of leave your family. And look, and these places are suburbs, right? But even within the suburbs, they are developing these small little downtown kind of areas.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you said, where people can live and work.
The same thing is happening back home to me. It was super incredible. And I got really into, this whole concept of public transportation. I think it's just a consequence of my generation, but also I was fortunate enough to get to travel to Europe my freshman year. And I got to see how their public transportation system works, particularly Amsterdam. And I was just blown away. I was blown away that like you can move anywhere within, the city, just basically either walking or getting on a metro, and that there's not
Yeah.
cars, that interrupt the pedestrians. One thing that you said earlier, which it just always this ticks me off, because I just think that it's so funny. Elon Musk, he proposed a solution to the traffic problem in Los Angeles, and his solution was to do an underground tunnel
Yeah.
for only Teslas. And I just can't wait till he hears about trains. He's going to lose his mind because it's just the exact same concept, but actually accessible to more people. And people were like gloating him as like, oh wow, look at this new innovative idea. Now it's a train system, but for cars. Like he literally would put the Teslas on tracks, and they would like move under this system.
Yeah, he had this concept too, and I think originally when he first came out with it, I don't know if it was just for Teslas, but it was almost like you ever kind of been to like you'll see it like some of the old pharmacies, and they used to have these like at the banks, where you would drive up before they
Yeah,
had ATMs.
the tube.
They had the tube, right? That
Yeah,
would go. You would put your stuff in the tube, and it would just like
yeah,
up, and it would go to the other side. That's kind of like how he first proposed it.
yeah. That was the idea, and he
You
wanted to
get
do it
into
with
the
Teslas.
tube, you get into this thing, and it would just shoot you to where you were going. And you could be like from LA to San Francisco in about 30 minutes. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
it
don't
just it
know.
makes no sense to me. And a lot of people.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
it's kind of like the gondola idea that they're trying to come up with, like in Los Angeles. That
The
these
what?
guys, so the former owner of the Dodgers, Frank McCourt, is really kind of pushing this idea of gondolas like above the city, like so to get people to Dodger Stadium so that you could go and you would just take a gondola from like downtown LA all the way to like Dodger Stadium in order to get you to the game.
That's all. I think we could start with trains. I'm not against the idea of a
Yeah.
gondola, but I think we can start with the trolley. Um,
Yeah, no, and I think it is right. Having the things, and look, Washington D.C., where I spend a lot of time there now in Congress. I went to college out there. You're going to college there now. I think the the people of Georgetown didn't have the foresight to see like how You know, they were like against the
Yeah, they
metro
oppose
coming
it.
into their area when they were building it out. And now I wish, I think a lot of them kind of wish they could take that back.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. And no, I think that it's super interesting as well. You were bringing it up earlier how these suburban areas. Obviously, I'm from a very, very. It is the suburbs now, but when I was growing up, it was extremely rural. Like, there was no restaurants there.
Mhm.
There was nothing. You got a McDonald's and that was about it. But now
Right.
there's different centers in Forsyth County. So you have one called Vickery Village, and it's the exact same thing that we're talking about. People driving their golf carts, and it's around a bunch of different neighborhoods, and there's a little town center, and then you drive 15 minutes north, about 10 minutes north, and there's another one called the Halcyon. And it's the same thing. There's apartments, there's restaurants, there's daycares, there's all of these things, and then you drive 10 more minutes, and it's another one called the Avalon. And that one's a little bit more bougie, if you will, but it's still one of those nicer community centers. And the one thing that I just always wish is like, well, there's a fourth one called the Cumming City Center. I just wish that there was like some way to connect these city centers, because I see a lot of my friends and I see a lot of people, especially my friends' parents. They'll kind of jump between these city centers. And not to rat anyone out here, but you're having fun at these city centers, and I don't think that maybe it's the best idea to be going from having fun to driving to another city center to driving to another city center. I think that it's a safety thing. I think it's an economic thing. But another thing, and I'd be interested to hear your take on this, is it's a culture thing. I have this idea that car culture in the United States. I love cars. I actually, one of the first cars that I had was a 1994 Jeep Wrangler that me and my dad would work on from the Jurassic, what was that, World, I guess, movie.
Yeah.
Has the little square headlights, and it was a 6-inch lift. It was nice. It was fun. I appreciate that component of it, but I think that it does isolate us a lot. One thing about public transportation that I do also enjoy, and I think it's an underrated aspect of it, is the fact that you're kind of forced to interact with other people. You don't just like hop in your car, turn on the radio station that reinforces the things that you already believe, drive to the place where you enter, and it continues to present you with ideas that you're already comfortable with. I think it does force people to kind of experience different things, interact with people that they never met before, as opposed to kind of just living in an isolated bubble that I feel like has really caused a lot of this loneliness epidemic that we're talking about here in the United States.
Well, I don't know if cars are causing the loneliness epidemic, but I mean, there definitely is a car culture here, and I will say, like, it's a big part of like Southern California, right? Is that
Yeah.
people would rather drive themselves and sit in traffic than kind of take public transportation. I mean, it's going to have to be like I think an education process to kind of get people to kind of used to that, to kind of to take the trains and to do this. I mean, you see it like in Washington D.C., right? It's not even a second thought, right? And actually, I took, when I stay in Washington D.C., I'm out in Northern Virginia, and I one day decided, you know what, I'm going to take the metro in to the capital, and because it can take, I mean, even there, right? It can take me an hour to drive in sometimes when I have to drive in, but I'm like, I'm going to take the metro one day, but I was actually kind of surprised. Maybe it's my Southern California mentality, right? I was actually surprised how packed it was, of how many people were actually taking the metro to go into DC to go into work. Just out from and I'm not talking Alexandria, Arlington, Northern Virginia. I'm talking further out, and that actually kind of surprised me, right? And I think and again, right, I had friends, right, that lived in San Francisco, or I lived in the Bay Area. I lived in like Alameda, Oakland, and they would, it was taking the bus across the Bay Bridge to go into San Francisco, or taking the BART. It wasn't even a second thought, to kind of do that. That's just the way it's how you did it. It's how you got to work.
Time for a quick message from our sponsors.
This episode of whodem is brought to you by Elect Dems Now. We all know that podcasts are the future. They give us the chance to connect with our elected officials like never before. That's why Elect Dems Now is committed to helping voters engage with the people who represent us. Supporting organizations that bring us closer to our elected officials is crucial to advancing and advocating for the change we want to see. Whether it's $5 or $50, every donation to Elect Dems Now helps shape our future and ensures a country we can all be proud of. Your support sends a clear message to candidates and elected officials. Connecting with you means connecting with America. To contribute and make a difference, visit electdemsnow.org today. Your donation helps build a world where we are all connected. Paid for by Elect Dems Now, electdemsnow.org, not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee. Yeah, do you think that it's like people just prefer cars because they prefer, the aspect, the personalization? Because that's something that I do completely understand, where it's like the individual component of it. Or do you think it is because a lot of our public transportation systems are bad, and then on top of that get a bad rap?
Yeah, I think that's kind of mainly the latter there that you said, right? I think in California, I think we're just used to driving, right? Especially when I say Southern California, right? We're just used to driving because, it's just let me get in the car and go. And whether you're sitting in traffic, right? You don't have to wait for the bus. There was no trains to take. There was no metro. There was no like subway system that you could take, right? So it was either the bus or you. And if you had to drive to downtown LA, you may have to kind of like go somewhere and then transfer to another bus and kind of have to wait for that one. It was just easier for a lot of people just to kind of sit in their car and go. And even though they're kind of having to deal with the hassle of traffic, it is there. I mean, I have a cousin that's, again, doesn't drive, grew up in Southern California, doesn't drive. Um, you know, she went to college in New York. She lived in Austin, and now she lives in Minnesota and Minneapolis area. But all areas to where she's kind of like how she's decided where she's going to live. It's like public transportation.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what she uses to get around. And she's a big advocate for public transportation, as she should be, and we all should be. And I think here, in our thing in Southern California, it's just got to be bigger. We have to educate people on the importance of it, and we have to make it safe too, right? Because I think that is part of the concept as well, is that people are afraid that it won't be safe, right? And we have to ensure that they will be safe.
Yeah. That's always one of those things that also gets me about big cities. And I think that I understand it coming from a rural environment. And James Baldwin says it best, which is travel is the cure to ignorance. But I feel like a lot of people, especially with big cities, they have this idea of like, you walk outside, you're getting shot. It's over. You're getting stabbed the second that you go outside. I've been on the metro now for 3-4 years. I've never had a negative interaction, never had a negative incident. Within Washington, D.C. itself, you'll have every once in a while, just like you will in any other city, where you have an interaction that maybe makes you a little uncomfortable.
I like the, you talk about big major cities, right? And you travel to Europe. I've always found it, for me, right, the best where I've enjoyed cities the most is when I stopped being a tourist and I just kind of started. Like, when I say stop being a tourist, it's like, okay, I got to go see this site. I got to go here. I got to go to this museum. I got to do that. And I just kind of walked the city. The first time I ever went to New York was miserable because we were trying to go. We got to go to the Empire State Building. We got to go, we got to get to the Statue of Liberty. And everywhere you went, there was like, 3-4 hour lines. And it was just, but the first time I actually walked, just, what, we're just going to walk and we're going to go, and whatever happens, we'll get here or there. I enjoyed it so much more. And the same thing with Paris. When I went to Europe, right, and going to Paris and Rome, just the ability to kind of go and to get around, and you could hop on the bus in Rome and to get where you need to go, and even the Paris has a metro system as well too to kind of get you around. But being able, like in Paris, to walk down the Champs-Élysées, which hopefully I said it right.
There you go. It sounds right to me.
Yeah, well, I think I did say it wrong, but right, the Champs-Élysées, or however you pronounce it.
I have no clue.
If you throw a little French accent on there, it sounds good. But being able to walk down there and just kind of there, it's like, your area, you're in the city, and you could go to the different neighborhoods and different parts there, and it just makes it so much vibrant and enjoyable.
Yeah.
I think trying to create that in kind of our communities as well is something that we should strive for.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at more so with the cultural impact of like having public transportation. It's not so much that cars cause the loneliness epidemic, but more so when you have public transportation, you can go to those small city centers, and you're more inclined to do it. It's easier to navigate it.
And you don't have to look for parking.
Yes,
So
yeah, you don't.
which is a
I was
pain
going
in
to tell
the
you,
ass no matter what city you're in.
my first experience in New York was absolutely atrocious. We share this.
Yeah.
So my parents, we decided to do a road trip. I can't even remember why, but it was like during the pandemic. We decided to drive up the whole East Coast, make it all the way up to New York.
Mhm.
And when we're in New York, we're in like a 2008 Lincoln, it's either an Expedition or a Lincoln Navigator. It's an older car, and this is going to be super car nerdy. But they had spring systems usually in the back of the car to deal with the suspension.
Yeah.
Well, the 2008 model of the Lincoln Navigator, they changed to air suspension,
Mhm.
and so when we're hitting the potholes in New York, our air suspension system breaks. It pops.
Wow.
And so we're now having to drive through all of these potholes with no suspension. We don't have a mechanic. We're having to find expensive parking. You're stuck in traffic. And I agree with you. I ended up going the second time that I went to New York. I stayed with my girlfriend who's from New York, and we stayed in Brooklyn. No concept of what we were going to go do tourist wise. First night, hey, we're craving some Mexican food. What's the Mexican food here in this area? We talked to, actually, we were being hosted in Airbnb by this really cool guy, and we just asked him, you live here, hey, what do you think? What are the good restaurants? And he showed us. It was a nice little hole in the wall spot. I had so much more fun that time,
Yeah.
where I wasn't forced, kind of like you're saying, to kind of do the first time. I was just spending it in Times Square, and I was going and seeing all of these things, but actually being a part of what it feels like to be a New Yorker, I think was pretty cool for me. I want to ask you something a little bit completely off topic, but just I'm curious about. Have you been hearing about all the Epstein stuff with the Trump administration?
All I've heard is the same thing you've heard, like in the news, right? And look,
Yeah.
you know, that's another promise that he made, um, for whatever reason, and it could be just I don't think Donald Trump is the brightest bulb, you know, so even though there's numerous pictures of him, right, and it's part of his narcissistic mentality as well, right? It's like, no, I wasn't part of that. It was I mean, there's all kinds of video, there's pictures, all kinds of evidence that somehow they were friends and they were together and they hung out and did things. And even though there is that, right, he's always going to have this denial, like, oh no, I never knew him. We never did anything there, right? So he makes these promises of the files coming out, right, without even kind of thinking the possibility that somehow he might be on them as well, right? That
Yeah.
that he's in the little black book.
Yeah. Well,
You
I
know.
mean, kind of like the certainty when you've flown on the Lolita Express 7 times, when Jeffrey
Yeah.
Epstein buys a house 7 minutes away from Mar-a-Lago because you two are best friends during the 1990s, when reports came out that Jeffrey Epstein was using Mar-a-Lago as one of his scouting grounds for the people that he was going to go on to traffic. I think it's kind of hard to be like, I don't really know this guy. And then
Yeah.
you have Pam Bondi say, oh, the list is sitting right. Actually, Max, can we get this clip up? Because I want to get your reaction to this, Representative. Fox News is one of the worst outlets, and they do not know how to do journalism. I think me and you can agree on that. They don't.
Well,
They do
I
fake
mean, they'll
journalism.
even tell you they're not journalists, right? This isn't,
Yes.
they have no, um, what is it? What was their argument or something like they
Yeah.
don't have
This
to
is.
relate to the truth because they're actually not journalists.
Yeah, yeah. This is funny backstory here. I used to do another show, and in the show we would put the same disclaimer that Fox News used, which was that you cannot hold us to a journalistic standard because we are not journalists. We're entertainers.
Yeah.
We're entertainment. That was their argument.
Mhm.
And we just thought that it was so funny that we just included it in the description of our episodes as well. Because what an argument to make. Fox News is not news, it's entertainment. And so if you can make that argument as a journalist, then I feel like anyone should be able to make the argument to say whatever they want.
Kind of the same argument that the WWE makes now, right? It's like, we're not actually, we're actually entertainment, and they changed their thing about how wrestling was, with and I grew up loving wrestling. I was a big Hulkamaniac, kind of broke my heart, but yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the fact that they kind of had this whole, no, it's real, this is real, it's a sports, and then once they were going to start taxing sports, like in certain states, like I think in New York and New Jersey, they're like, oh no, now we're entertainment. And
Yeah.
actually this is all scripted.
Yes, yeah, no, I remember it broke my heart too. My cousin, obviously older cousin here, he's 7 years older than me. He would always, WWE's not real, WWE's fake, and I'd be like, no, it's not true, it's real.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was disheartening, definitely, to see the Hulk Hogan. I didn't grow up with the Hulk Hogan generation, but obviously
Yeah.
any WWE fan, they do the thing where they bring back, personalities over and over
Yeah.
again.
See,
I was more
seeing
John Cena
him,
and The Rock.
seeing him kind of out there for Trump kind of really broke my heart there.
Yeah, yeah, but it doesn't.
Trump, because I will tell you this, and you can say this, and then we can get to the clip that you want to show, right?
Yeah.
Hulk Hogan's message when I was a kid, right, was say your prayers, train, say your prayers, eat your vitamins. Donald Trump ain't doing any of those things.
Nope. Nope. Okay, on another side tangent. Have you heard Donald Trump's? Maybe we've talked about this on the show before, but his theory, his battery theory, where he thinks that the reason Donald Trump doesn't work out is because he believes that your heart is like a battery. The more that you use it, the quicker that it drains. I wish that I could be making this up. I know that it sounds like I'm going to do a punchline here, and there's no setup. This is just a theory. Have you heard this before?
No, but I mean, it's not surprising, right? This is the same guy who wanted people to drink bleach in order to kind of clear out the disease inside their bodies.
Yeah, 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 Max. We get this the clip of the Fox News journalist deciding that he remembered that he went to journalism school and that he can prepare for a question and a response. Let's get it.
Death of Jeffrey Epstein. According to the report, this systematic review revealed no incriminating client list. So what happened to the Epstein client list that the Attorney General said she had on her desk?
Well, I think if you go back and look at what the Attorney General said in that interview, which was on your network on Fox News. Go ahead.
John Roberts said, DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen? And she said, it's sitting on my desk right now to review.
Yes, she was saying the entirety of all of the paperwork, all of the paper in relation to Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. That's what the Attorney General was referring to, and I'll let her speak for that. But again, when it comes to the FBI and the Department of Justice, they are more than...
I love how she speaks for the Attorney General and then goes, I'm not going to speak for the Attorney General, though. But the focus there for me on that clip is the fact that he knew that he was going to try to hit her with some bullshit, or that she was going to try to hit him with some bullshit. And not only did he know that, he knew that she was going to reference the clip. Like, he did real journalism where, okay, I'm going to ask you this question. This is more than likely going to be their response. So I'm going to have this follow-up ready. And she still dodged it, but...
Well, he just better watch it. He may find himself that he's banned all of a sudden from the White House briefing room. He keeps asking questions like that, right?
Yeah, don't worry. They'll welcome him with the podcast briefing room that they have over there. He'll find a space. I had one last thing. Yes, one last thing that I want to end on, just because I did want to get your comment on this when Aaron was here. Aaron, first of all, I don't know if you've done a deep dive into him. I did hours and hours of research for this. This man does not stop working. I don't know if you saw him literally when he was even on the call with us. It looked like he was, getting messages.
Stuff, yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. He doesn't stop working. And I think that you can tell that he doesn't stop working with this clip as well. But it has to do with San Bernardino, which is the larger concept here. But he's at the dentist right now.
The Catholic Church is now authorizing at least one parishioner to skip Sunday Mass out of fears of possible ICE. This is a stunning development right now. Yes, I'm at the dentist with the news and stuff. This is a letter from the Diocese of San Bernardino from the office of the bishop. And this letter is a dispensation from the obligation to attend Mass. All members of the faithful in the Diocese of San Bernardino who, to genuine fear of immigration enforcement actions, are unable to attend Sunday Mass or Masses on holy holidays of obligation are dispensed from this obligation.
We can cut it there.
Folks, this is historic.
Yeah.
He goes on to say, obviously, the Catholic Church doesn't do this willy-nilly, and we know that. So at first, thoughts on Aaron just never stopping working, and then obviously what's going on in San Bernardino.
No, I think 100%, right. And I mean, he's a very intelligent individual. I think to graduate from high school at 14, into college, and then finish law school at 20, however old he was. But then to actually go into working as a lawyer too, right after that. I mean, he's very smart. He's very bright. He's very intelligent. I mean, all the synonyms, right, to go along with how smart he is. And it was like a pleasure, to get to know him and his wife a little bit there, kind of when we had that dinner, and very, very generous, with his time and everything, right? Because this is, my wife, kind of tracked him down through a connection, and and she just kind of said, "Hey, it would be great. If would you mind kind of meeting some of the students here? They're going to be here in D.C." And he was like, "Oh yeah, no problem." And met with them, and stayed for dinner, and it was kind of me and his wife we were talking. We were like sitting across from each other, and she's like, "Yeah, I grew up around Los Angeles in this like city." I'm like, "Oh yeah, me too." Like, "Where'd you grow up?" She goes, "Oh, I grew up in this city called Torrance." I'm like, "So did I." And we were like, "What high school did you go to?" She went to Torrance. I'm like, "So did I." So
Wow.
it was kind of funny that we found out that we had that connection there too as well.
Yeah, small world.
Yeah, no, they're both great people, and both very smart, and his wife even too, not as early as he did, but she ended up graduating early from college as well too.
Yeah.
So both very bright and intelligent people.
Yeah, and then with this,
Again, like you said, never stops working. And just to kind of get on to the whole thing with the diocese, being a Catholic, right? Going to mass is an obligation of being a Catholic, and kind of the fact that the church would grant this to kind of say like, hey, you no longer have this obligation if you feel that you're being threatened because of ICE. That's a big deal. That is a really
Yeah.
big deal. And just to kind of go into this a little bit further, I somehow kind of more and more are thinking that it's no coincidence that the Pope is an American now, who lived overseas in Latin America, who's been an advocate for immigrants and immigrant rights, throughout the world, to kind of counter what's going on here in the United States right now. I more and more I think about that. I just don't think that it's an accident that he ended up being our Pope at this time.
yeah. Did you
Counter what's going on right now with the president?
did you end up watching the movie? Oh my God! Wow, I'm forget Conclave.
Conclave, yes.
You ended up watching. I feel like as much as obviously that movie was fictional, it was based off of obviously how they do the process to some extent. But at the end, I don't want to spoil it. So if you haven't
Yeah.
watched it and plan on watching it,
Well, if you haven't
skip
watched it by
part.
now, it's like too late, right? It
Yeah.
was nominated for Best Picture last year. It's already kind of been out for like 2 years, so just go ahead and spoil it.
Yeah, well, obviously the big thing at the end is that the Pope that they nominate ends up being intersex. They end up, being I forget the I think it's a hermaphrodite. Is a term. I don't know if that's a pejorative, but that's the term that I've been familiarized with. So yeah, the big story, and I think that obviously what the movie was trying to get at is this tension that I think we're seeing in the Catholic Church behind the scenes, which is what step do they take with a world that's changing, and particularly a world that's changing as it comes to LGBTQ issues. And so they address it that way in the movie, but I think there's some parallels to your point with how they acted, how the process went on in real life. They said, well, this is a big issue that I think the church is going to have to respond to, so why don't we put who we think would be the best equipped to deal with that. Obviously, in the movie, they didn't really know. It ends up being this whole thing. But I think from a film perspective, the directors were very intentional with why they decided to do that.
Yeah, no, I think so too. In the movie, there was, obviously a reason that they kind of did that and everything. And it was I think to kind of try to deal with some issues probably within the Catholic Church. But I think kind of back in like our world right now, right? Like I said, more and more I'm thinking it's no accident that our Pope ended up being an American who's been an advocate for immigrant rights, kind of going on right now. What's going on in this country.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was like a bunch of cardinals getting together and say, hey, we need to do this, or if it was divine intervention from the Lord above. But, the more and more I think about it, it's no accident.
Yeah. Well, ultimately, it was definitely God's decision, whether it was through the Cardinals or whether it was, like literally their decision actively. I wanted to go back just kind of end on this note, actually too, just because I have another question as well, but just an update on what's going on in Los Angeles. I saw, obviously, Aaron talked about it a little bit. They raided farms. They brought in helicopters. They brought in horses, I saw. They broke protocol typically, and they were like hurting protesters. What's the situation like right now?
You know, again, right? Well, that actually happened in Ventura County, which is
Mm.
outside of Los Angeles. But again, that's part of the whole kind of media market right here. It's all kind of included together. But um, I mean, it just is like a whole thing about what's going on here, right? It's again, they're doing these things for show, right? And it doesn't matter what the president said, like, oh, we're not going to go after these individuals. Well, they are going after these individuals. Just as disturbing is what actually did happen a few days earlier than that, was the raid in MacArthur Park, where
Yes.
kids were doing summer camps, right? And this was done specifically for show because they had Fox News with them, and they were taking Fox News with them on a raid, and so they're like, okay, what can we do? And we're like, okay, we're going to go to MacArthur Park. And it's just, it's just a bunch of kids, right? And I don't even know if they think they've actually made any arrests that day. I don't remember or not, but the fact that they're doing this and going after kids and kind of doing it to play for the cameras because they want to be able to show, right, that again, to portray this message that California, Los Angeles, it's in disarray, it's being overtaken by immigrants, it's lawlessness going on here, and nothing could be further from the truth.
No.
But that is that is the image, and that's why they had Fox News with them, because they wanted to be projected across the rest of the country to kind of put this message there that somehow we are being overrun by immigrants and being controlled by them and overtaken by them, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah, no. I mean, we talk about it relentlessly on this episode. The net benefit that immigrants, contribute to society as a whole. And I think that the conversation needs to be more so how we can better, situate Americans to strive in the economy. Because I think a lot of it does come back down to, at least when you're looking at the resentment and the reason why people feel this way, it's because they feel like the narrative is always that they're taking your jobs.
Yeah.
But the reality is, and we've talked about it on the show, these are jobs that Americans wouldn't want to do. And to a certain extent,
it's just. So here's kind of again, right? Their contradiction in their messaging, right? It's like, they're having debate on the one big ugly bill, the big billionaire bailout. My last amendment that I tried to put forth was to change the name to Nobody Wants This Act, because nobody wants this, right? 60% of Americans didn't want this, and but a lot of the rhetoric on the right side of the aisle there was that, it's Medicaid is being overrun by immigrants. That's who's there. We're going to get them off the rolls. They don't belong there, or we're subsidizing them and we're doing it, which is a false, because you can't sign up for Medicare if you're not a U.S. citizen. But yet you had the Secretary of Agriculture talking about how, again, right, and this was before the raid actually happened there in Ventura County, about, Donald Trump's not going back on his message. He's going his words. We're going to go after these individuals. We're going to take them out. And it doesn't, and despite what farmers are saying and how the impact this is having on farms and agriculture, we're going to continue to deport these individuals. And, since we have 34 million able bodies on Medicare, that are currently on Medicaid that shouldn't be on Medicaid, they're going to be the ones that'll kind of fill in positions, and they'll take the jobs in the fields.
yeah.
Now, just a week earlier, you were telling us that a lot of majority of the people that were on here that were undocumented individuals, they're on Medicaid, and now you're telling us it's not all immigrants or undocumented individuals, but able-bodied people who are going to now somehow move into this thing and start working in the fields. Not going to happen.
No. No, it's not. And again, going back to the contradictions, Donald Trump, when he was visiting, alligator, whatever you want to call it, I have a worse term than they do, but
alligator Alcatraz, right? He couldn't. Remember he's talking about opening Alcatraz back up as a prison.
Yeah, he got it.
National Park now can't do that, so they did the next best thing for him, I guess, in his mind was okay. Yeah. Well, we'll give you alligator Alcatraz.
Yeah, and when he was touring it, he did a press conference there. And we have a clip for it. I would explain it to you because he's incoherent, and it doesn't really sound like he's making sense. But he was talking about how he wants to essentially, some people are referred to it as indentured servitude. Indentured servitude to me is slavery, so I'm going to call it what it is. He wants to create a system where the farmers are given illegal immigrants that they look after and that they're responsible for. And he was throwing out this idea that, representative, to me, sounds like slavery. Do you think I'm going too far in saying that?
No. I mean, and you're not the first one that I heard say that either, right? But the guy has no concept of reality or time or what's right or what's wrong. He used a derogatory term to describe Jewish people last week too, and didn't even know that it was bad. And I'm like, well, I guess obviously you've never seen Shakespeare before, right? You don't
Which I
know.
wouldn't put up with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How could you not know, right? You're claiming to be this educated, well-rounded individual, and yet, you don't even know a term that comes from one of Shakespeare's most popular plays.
Yeah, no, I remember I don't know if it was my dad or a teacher growing up that instilled this in me, but it's, try not to use words that you don't know.
Right.
No, try not to say things if they have a connotation with them that you might not be familiar with. Then you don't necessarily want to be saying those things. I think that, and I've had this theory for a while now. Look, ultimately, and Aaron was kind of getting at it too. And we can end on this note. But it was with. I was listening to another podcast actually from the New York Times as well. They do an exceptional podcast that I've been following a little bit more called The Interview, where they bring on celebrities. And one person that they brought on was Eric Schultz. I'm not sure if you're familiar.
The
Andrew
actor
Schultz.
Mask.
Andrew Schultz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait,
Andrew
Eric
Schultz.
Schultz or
No, it was Andrew Schultz. Sorry.
I don't know.
Yeah. Eric. Yeah. Andrew Schultz. Eric Schultz was Obama's former deputy press secretary, if I'm not mistaken. Andrew Schultz is a comedian. Very different people. And either way, Andrew Schultz is one of these podcasters, and he was talking about how, in the '90s, everyone kind of saw the Democrats as cool. You had Bill Clinton playing the saxophone. You had him going out and being Bill Clinton. You kind of had this concept of the Democratic Party as being something very different, and I guess that's where a lot of this conversation online is kind of going. What do you think about that? Do you think that the Democratic Party has shifted from where it was in the '90s, or do you think it's stayed the same?
I don't know. To be honest with you, I really haven't kind of thought about it too hard. I know. I think both. President Obama and President Clinton had some kind of, I don't know, there was an it factor to them, right? There was something about them that kind of made people draw to them. It was just getting weird. Now, in all truth and honesty, I was not the biggest Bill Clinton fan.
Yeah.
But, having met him, when I met him, and I met him a couple different times, right? Now, not like he would remember if we ever kind of crossed paths again, but I don't know, just talking to him on a personal level and kind of being there, right? And kind of he gives you this little, God bless you. I don't know, there was just something about that just kind of, he resonated with people, right? And I think President Obama's the same way, right? He kind of, there was a down to earth kind of something about President Obama, right? President Obama, when he came out to campaign for us, when I ran for the first time, told this story about how he got kicked out of Disneyland for smoking. But I mean, that's kind of something that could happen to anybody, right? It happened to a normal type person, and it's relatable.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the thing where they were relatable. And it's not to say that I think people aren't, right? But there was a cool factor to them. There was a relatableness to them. There was things that kind of, for whatever people kind of made people gravitate towards them.
Yeah.
And it's easy to kind of have that, they were both became leaders of the Democratic Party, and it was easy to rally around them. And again, we just don't really have that right now.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And
No, I think.
yeah.
Well, I think that was also kind of that was exactly what Schultz was getting at. He was talking about how Aaron used the term cool. The way that Eric Schultz talked, or Andrew Schultz, sorry, talked about it was he was saying that the way that he viewed it growing up was that the Democratic Party was the party that let you do things. They were the party that wanted you to. And again, this is him talking from his perspective. That was like cool and relaxed, and they didn't really care what you said. And then it kind of switched. And it was kind of the Democratic part or the Republican Party that was cool and relaxed, and they didn't really, they wanted to be able to say more things. And Donald Trump was over here doing this, that, the other. The relatability factor was, I think, what he was trying to hit at. So I think that it is interesting. And I will end on this note. Do you think that between now and 2028, we will find someone to kind of build around, or do you think that it's kind of what Aaron says, where it's you need to kind of just let it happen?
Well, I think I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think kind of going into the midterms, I think Trump is his biggest enemy right now, right? Again, I think he surrounded himself with people, I think, who really have no kind of concept of how things work, right? The tariffs are not good. He continually goes back on his word and things that he says, right? I mean, just like right now, this morning, I was reading about how, he announced we have a trade agreement with Vietnam. There is no trade agreement with Vietnam. And the fact is that he kind of sabotaged it because, he has this thing, and it was something that I remember kind of reading about when he had the show, right? Somebody was talking about him who kind of dealt with him, is that he always feels that he has to kind of, you can work out a deal with him, but then he always tries to one up you to kind of feel that he kind of gets the better end of the deal, right? Because that's just the narcissism in him. And they said he kind of sabotaged this so-called agreement that they were working towards with Vietnam by saying that it was okay. Vietnam said they were going to agree to like a 10 or 11% tariff. And then he's like, well, no, it's actually going to be this, right? Because he just feels that need that he has to have the better end of the deal.
Yeah.
And because of that, right now there is no deal.
Yeah.
And
It's what Claudius.
His kind of thing of like working with contractors and things like that he was able to kind of do in order to get a couple something, which he didn't pay for most of the time anyway. But at least when he was negotiating, getting it like a couple dollars cheaper, it's not working on the world stage for him like it did kind of like when he was trying to do his development things and stuff like that. And it's not working. And so he is his biggest enemy right now, right? The healthcare thing is not going to work, and I think people are going to start to see, because people are going to start to kind of feel it, right? Even if the things don't go into effect. The fact that some of these hardliners, they got people who have been hardliners on immigration are even kind of pushing back now on the fact of the cruelty of what's taking place is not going to work in his favor. It is just, to Aaron's point, I think his destructiveness and everything that he's going to do is kind of going to be his biggest enemy. And I think we kind of saw that's kind of what happened in 2017, 2018, was that, I think that's why you had the big changes, because he was the big factor in that, right? People came out and they had a huge turnout in 2018 because it was a vote against Trump, in the House of Representatives. And I think coming towards the presidential election in 2028, you're going to need that individual, and there may be a couple that kind of come out right, but it is going to have to be that individual that can kind of take the reins, that's going to lead, that's going to have to become the leader of the Democratic Party, and be charismatic about doing it.
Anyone you have your eyes on in particular?
I won't mention that right now, but
Okay.
I do.
All right.
I do, but I won't. And look,
Okay.
I think there's several charismatic individuals that can kind of go there and can kind of have people draw them. I think our governor in California, Gavin Newsom's one. I think the governor of Maryland's another one, Pete Buttigieg. another individual that people tend to like. They're charismatic, they're well spoken, and people can kind of gravitate towards them.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there's not others that are out there as well, but I think whoever becomes that leader is going to have to be like that, Bill Clinton kind of, Barack Obama type, right? Somebody that is going to be charismatic, that people gravitate towards, right? That'll kind of be a factor in winning 28.
Yeah, we call it Riz in my generation, Representative. They have to have Riz.
Yeah.
And yeah,
from
no,
our kids.
yeah. Are your kids running around asking if they have Riz?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, with your earlier point, I just think that, it's also, that's what Claudia Sheinbaum did with the deals that she gave Trump. She'd be like, yeah, let's do this deal, and I'm going to throw in this thing that we were already doing. And he was like, wow, isn't that great? I'll take that as well. And so now it's a good deal. But with that being said, Representative, thank you so much for joining us again, coming on the show, having another conversation. It was really wonderful.
All right. Well, thanks.
It's
been great as always. This has, I think, been our longest recording ever.
This is our longest recording ever. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Do you like the more casual environment once you get towards the end of a podcast? I feel like you break down the barriers once you start to kind of near the hour mark.
I think casual's better. Casual's always better.
Yeah. I agree 100%.
All right.
All righty. Well, great talking to you, Rob.
Talk to you later. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Bye.